It was a bright Tuesday morning when Martha Jenkins pulled into the Oakwood Luxury Mall parking lot in her electric Tesla Model 3. The car was nice but not flashy, exactly how Martha liked it. At 43 years old, she had learned that being understated often worked to her advantage, especially as a black woman worth $2.3 billion. Martha chose a parking spot far from the mall entrance, something she had always done even before becoming wealthy. The morning sun reflected off the mall's giant glass windows as she stepped out of her car, wearing a simple black blazer, white shirt, and comfortable pants. Her natural hair was neatly styled in a professional bun, and she carried a plain leather bag that contained her laptop and business documents. Another day, another opportunity, Martha whispered to herself, a habit she had developed during her journey from a small apartment in Brooklyn to becoming one of America's most successful tech entrepreneurs. She was here today not to shop but to explore the possibility of opening one of her digital futures innovation centers in the mall's empty wing. As she walked toward the entrance, Martha couldn't help but notice how different this felt from 20 years ago when she started her first small computer repair shop. Back then, she could barely afford to window shop at places like this. Now she could buy the entire mall if she wanted to, not that anyone here knew that. The automatic doors slid open, releasing a blast of cool air. Martha checked her phone, 10:15 a.m. She was 15 minutes early for her meeting with the mall management. Her assistant, James, would join her later with additional documents, but she always liked to arrive first to observe the environment. The mall was relatively quiet at this hour. A few early shoppers wandered between stores, their heels clicking against the polished marble floors. Soft music played through hidden speakers, and the smell of coffee from a nearby cafe filled the air. Martha noticed the high-end stores lining both sides. Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Cartier, all the usual suspects. She decided to walk around while waiting for her meeting time. As she passed the luxury stores, Martha noticed something familiar starting to happen. Something she had experienced countless times before becoming successful, and still experienced despite her wealth. A security guard began following her, trying to look casual but failing miserably. Martha smiled to herself. She had seen this movie before, and she knew exactly how it would play out. She entered a high-end jewelry store, pretending not to notice how the security guard outside spoke quietly into his radio. Inside, the salespeople suddenly became very busy, all except one who watched her like a hawk. "Can I help you?" asked a sales associate, her tone suggesting she'd rather do anything else. The woman's name tag read Karen, which made Martha want to laugh at the irony. "I'm just browsing, thank you," Martha replied politely, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who could buy every piece in the display case without denting her bank account. The next 10 minutes proved interesting. 2 more security guards had appeared outside the store, and the staff inside seemed to be playing an elaborate game of watch the customer without looking like you're watching the customer. Martha checked her phone again, 10:25 a.m., almost time for her meeting. As she turned to leave the store, she heard Karen speaking in hushed tones to another employee. "Make sure nothing's missing." Walking toward the mall management office, Martha felt a mix of emotions she had grown familiar with over the years. Disappointment, but not surprise. Anger, but controlled and focused. She had learned long ago to transform these experiences into fuel for change. What the mall staff didn't know, what they couldn't have guessed while they were busy profiling her, was that Martha Jenkins wasn't just another shopper. She was the founder and CEO of Digital Futures Incorporated, a technology company valued at over $4 billion. She held 3 patents, had created jobs for thousands of people, and was on the cover of Forbes last month. But more importantly, she was someone who had never forgotten what it felt like to be judged based on her skin color. Someone who had turned every no into a watch me. Someone who had learned to use underestimation as her secret weapon. As she approached the management office, Martha straightened her blazer and checked her reflection in a nearby window. She smiled, knowing that the next hour would be very interesting indeed. The mall director was about to learn an expensive lesson about judging books by their covers. Martha walked into the mall management office at exactly 10:30 a.m. The receptionist, a young woman with bleached blonde hair, looked up from her computer and frowned slightly. The office was fancy, with expensive artwork on the walls and leather furniture, but the welcome was ice cold. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked, her tone suggesting she doubted this was possible. "Yes, I'm here to meet Mr. Richard Thompson at 10:30. Martha Jenkins. Martha replied calmly, standing straight in her professional attire. The receptionist's fingers moved across her keyboard, her frown deepening. Oh, yes, I see it, dear. Please take a seat. I'll inform Mr. Thompson you're here. Her voice carried clear surprise at finding the appointment actually existed. Martha sat down in one of the leather chairs, taking out her phone to check some emails. She could hear the receptionist whispering into her phone, throwing quick glances in her direction. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. At 10:45 a.m., a door opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit walked out. This was Richard Thompson, the mall director, though he didn't bother introducing himself. He looked annoyed, as if Martha's presence was interrupting his important day. "Can I help you?" he asked, standing rather than inviting her into his office. Martha stood up and extended her hand. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Martha Jenkins. We have a 10:30 appointment to discuss the potential lease of the mall's east wing for my company's new innovation center." Thompson barely touched her hand during the handshake. "Right. About that, I'm afraid that space has already been leased to another company." Martha raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting, considering your leasing office confirmed yesterday that it was still available. In fact, I have the email right here." She pulled out her phone and showed him the message. Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "Well, things move quickly in real estate. The deal was just finalized this morning." Just then, Martha's assistant James walked in. He was carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a crisp suit. James was white, and Martha noticed immediately how Thompson's demeanor changed. "Ah, you must be Mr. Jenkins," Thompson said warmly, extending his hand to James. "No, I'm James Wilson, Ms. Jenkins's assistant," James replied coldly. "And I believe you were just explaining about a lease that was supposedly signed this morning." Martha watched as Thompson's face went through several shades of red. She took out her phone and pressed record, making sure it was visible. "Mr. Thompson," Martha said calmly, "I find it interesting that the space became unavailable exactly when you saw who I was. I also found it interesting how your security guards followed me around the mall and how your store employees treated me. Would you like to explain that?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Thompson sputtered. "We treat all our guests with respect." "All your guests?" James asked, pulling out his tablet. "Then you won't mind explaining these incident reports we collected from the past 6 months. 37 complaints of racial profiling in your mall, all dismissed without investigation." Thompson's face went pale. He looked from Martha to James, then back to Martha. "Listen, there must be some misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this in my office?" "I think we're past that point," Martha replied. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. Not just any business card, but one with the Forbes magazine logo on it. "You might recognize me from last month's cover. Martha Jenkins, the billion-dollar tech revolutionary." The change in Thompson's face was almost comical. His eyes widened as recognition finally hit him. Martha Jenkins, the woman his security team had been following around like a shoplifter, the woman he had just tried to dismiss, was one of the wealthiest tech entrepreneurs in the country. "Ms. Jenkins, I had no idea," he stammered. "Clearly," Martha said. "But here's what's going to happen now. I'm still interested in that space, Mr. Thompson. The terms have changed, and we're going to have a much longer conversation about how this mall treats its guests, all of its guests." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and you might want to call your lawyers. Mine will be in touch this afternoon. Come on, James." As they walked out of the office, leaving a stunned Thompson behind, James whispered, "That went exactly as you predicted." Martha smiled. "Sometimes, James, you have to let people show you who they are. Then you can show them who you are." They walked through the mall, past the same security guards who had followed her earlier. This time, they looked away, having been urgently radioed about their mistake. Martha held her head high, knowing that this was just the beginning of the changes she was about to bring to Oakwood Luxury Mall. The next morning, Martha sat in her downtown office on the 45th floor, looking out over the city skyline. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the previous day's incident at Oakwood Luxury Mall. Local news stations had somehow gotten wind of the story, and social media was exploding with similar stories from other shoppers who had faced discrimination at the same mall. "You need to see this," James said, walking into her office with his tablet. He placed it on her desk, showing her a video that was going viral. Someone had recorded her interaction with the jewelry store staff and the security guards. The video already had over 2 million views. Martha watched the footage silently. The camera angle clearly showed the security guards following her, the uncomfortable stares, and the whispered conversations. It was everything she had experienced her whole life, but now it was captured for everyone to see. The mall's PR team is in panic mode, James continued, scrolling through his emails. They've released 3 different statements since this morning. First they denied everything, then they apologized for a misunderstanding, and now they're requesting an urgent meeting with you. Martha smiled and sipped her morning tea. How many reporters are downstairs? At least 50, James replied. Every major network. They'd all want your statement about what happened. And you should see what people are saying online. Hashtag boycott Oakwood Mall is trending. Just then, Martha's personal phone rang. The caller ID showed Michelle Roberts, her old friend who was now a prominent civil rights attorney. Michelle, Martha answered, putting the phone on speaker. I assume you've seen the news. Girl, the whole country has seen it. Michelle's voice filled the room. I've got 15 other cases right here on my desk, all black shoppers, all from that same mall. What they did to you. They've been doing it for years. We can build a class action lawsuit that'll make their heads spin. Martha leaned back in her chair, thinking. This was bigger than just her incident now. What do you suggest? We hit them where it hurts, Michelle said firmly. We're talking millions in damages. The evidence is overwhelming. That video of your visit is just the tip of the iceberg. James raised his hand slightly, catching Martha's attention. Ms. Jenkins, Mr. Thompson from the mall has called 6 times this morning. They're lawyers too. They're offering to lease you the entire East Wing at half price. Martha laughed softly. A little late for that, isn't it? She stood up and walked to the window, watching the crowd of reporters below. This was a familiar scene to her, another moment where discrimination had tried to block her path. But like always, she had a bigger plan in mind. Michelle, she said, prepare the lawsuit. But I want something different. Instead of just money, I want structural changes. Mandatory training programs, diversity in hiring, community oversight, everything. And the East Wing? James asked. Martha turned around, a determined look in her eyes. Tell Mr. Thompson I'm no longer interested in leasing the East Wing. She paused, letting a slight smile cross her face. Because I'm going to buy the entire mall instead. The room fell silent for a moment before Michelle burst out laughing. Only you would respond to racism by buying the whole damn place. Check their stock price, Martha instructed James. After this PR disaster, I bet their parent company is taking a hit. James quickly pulled up the market data. Down 23% since opening bell. The shareholders are panicking. Perfect, Martha said. Call my investment team. Tell them to start buying shares, but quietly. We don't want to attract attention yet. She turned back to the phone. Michelle, hold off on filing the lawsuit for now. Let's give them 48 hours to sweat. As James hurried out to make the calls, Martha picked up her mother's old watch from her desk. She always touched it when making big decisions. Her mother had worked as a cleaner in places like Oakwood Mall, places where people had looked down on her every day. Times are changing, Mama, she whispered to herself, and we're going to be the ones changing them. She pressed the intercom button on her desk. James, call a press conference for tomorrow morning. It's time to show the world how we handle discrimination in 2024. The pieces were falling into place. Martha Jenkins hadn't become a billionaire by backing down from challenges. She'd done it by transforming obstacles into opportunities. And Oakwood Mall was about to become her biggest transformation yet. The press conference room at Digital Futures Incorporated was packed the next morning. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning as Martha Jenkins walked onto the stage. She wore a bold red blazer and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had just played a winning hand. Behind her, 6 large screens displayed different images: security camera footage from the mall, screenshots of internal emails, and statistics about discrimination incidents at Oakwood Mall. The room fell silent as she approached the microphone. Good morning, Martha began, her voice clear and strong. 2 days ago, I walked into Oakwood Luxury Mall as a potential business partner. Instead, I was treated like a criminal. But my story isn't unique. It's just the only one that happened to go viral. She gestured to one of the screens, which showed a spreadsheet. Over the past 24 hours, my team has received 847 emails from people sharing similar experiences at Oakwood Mall. Parents shopping for their children, professionals on lunch breaks, students buying prom dresses, all treated with suspicion because of the color of their skin. The reporters scribbled frantically in their notebooks. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as Martha continued. But this press conference isn't about sharing stories of discrimination. It's about announcing solutions. She paused, letting the anticipation build. 10 minutes ago, my company completed the purchase of a controlling stake in Oakwood Mall's parent company, Gateway Properties. The room erupted in gasps and excited whispers. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting questions. Martha raised her hand for silence. The purchase price was $2.1 billion, she continued calmly. And yes, that's billion with a B. Some might call it expensive. I call it an investment in change. James, standing at the side of the stage, smiled as he watched the faces of the reporters. Nobody had seen this coming. The mall that had discriminated against Martha Jenkins was now owned by her. Effective immediately, Martha announced, the following changes will be implemented at Oakwood Mall. First, the entire management team will be replaced. We've already hired diversity specialists to oversee new hiring practices. She clicked a remote, and the screens changed to show architectural plans. Second, we're transforming the East Wing into what we originally planned, a digital futures innovation center. But now it will be bigger. This center will provide free technology training to minority youth with guaranteed internship opportunities. Martha took a sip of water before delivering her next announcement. Third, we're establishing a community oversight board. This board will review all discrimination complaints and have real power to make changes. In the front row, she spotted Mr. Thompson, the former mall director, watching with a pale face. He had arrived uninvited, probably hoping to save his job. Martha met his eyes directly as she continued. Fourth, every store in the mall will be required to undergo mandatory anti-discrimination training. Those who fail to comply will find their leases terminated. She smiled slightly. It's amazing how quickly people can learn when their profits depend on it. The reporter's hands shot up, but Martha wasn't finished. Finally, we're establishing a $50 million fund to support minority-owned businesses who want to open stores in the mall. It's time for Oakwood Mall to reflect the diversity of our community. She opened the floor for questions, and the room exploded with raised hands and shouted queries. Martha pointed to a young black reporter in the front row. Ms. Jenkins, some would say buying an entire mall is an extreme response to one incident of discrimination. What's your response? Martha leaned into the microphone, her expression serious. Sometimes, extreme problems require extreme solutions. I didn't buy this mall for revenge. I bought it because some changes can only happen from the inside out. And sometimes, the only way to fix a broken system is to own it. As the questions continued, James checked his phone. The story was already trending nationwide. Hashtag Martha Means Business was the top hashtag on Twitter. The company's stock had jumped 15% since the announcement. But what really caught his attention was a message from an unknown number. Dear Ms. Jenkins, I'm a 12-year-old black girl who wants to learn coding. Thank you for showing me that we can change things. Can I join your first class at the new center? James smiled and forwarded the message to Martha. This was why she'd had done it. Not for revenge, not for publicity, but for that 12-year-old girl and thousands like her who needed to see what was possible. The press conference continued, but the real story was just beginning. Oakwood Mall was about to become a symbol of something entirely new. What happens when those who were once excluded become the ones in charge? 1 month after Martha's takeover of Oakwood Mall, the changes were already visible. Construction crews worked day and night on the East Wing, transforming it into the promised innovation center. The mall's atmosphere had shifted dramatically, but not everyone was happy about it. On a busy Thursday morning, Martha walked through the mall with her new management team. Sarah Chen, the newly appointed mall director, was showing her the progress. We've had some resistance from 5 luxury stores, Sarah explained, checking her tablet. They're threatening to break their leases. They claim their traditional customers are shopping elsewhere now. Martha stopped and looked at the stores in question. the same ones where she had been treated poorly a month ago. How are their sales numbers actually doing? Sarah smiled. That's the interesting part. Their sales are up 20% since we implemented the new policies. They're getting more customers, not fewer. They just don't like the type of customers they're getting. You mean they don't like that their customers are more diverse now? Martha corrected, watching as a group of teenage girls, black, Asian, and white, walked out of one of the luxury stores, shopping bags in hand. Just then, James rushed up to them, looking excited. "Miss Jenkins, you need to see this." He handed her his tablet, showing a local news website. The headline read, "Competing malls losing business as Oakwood Mall becomes model of inclusion." The numbers just came in, James continued. Our foot traffic is up 45% compared to last month. The job training programs are oversubscribed. We have 3,000 applications for 500 spots. And that viral video of you, it's being used in business schools now as a case study in transformative leadership. Martha nodded, but her attention was drawn to something else. Through the glass doors of the Innovation Center construction site, she could see the first batch of computers being delivered. Each one represented a potential future changed. "What about the Community Oversight Board?" she asked Sarah. "They've reviewed 30 complaints so far," Sarah replied. "Most were from before the takeover, but there were 3 new ones. All were resolved within 48 hours, with full transparency. The board is working exactly as intended." They walked past the mall's central fountain, which now displayed a new sculpture, a series of interlinked hands of different colors, reaching upward. Local artists had competed to design it, and the winning piece had been chosen by community vote. "Oh, and there's something else you should see," James added, pulling up another page on his tablet. "Remember Karen from the jewelry store? The one who watched you like you were going to steal something?" Martha raised an eyebrow. "What about her?" "She wrote this blog post. It's gone viral." James handed her the tablet. The post was titled, "How I Learned I Was Part of the Problem." In it, Karen detailed her experience going through the mall's new training program and realizing her own biases. She ended by apologizing publicly to Martha and asking to be part of the solution. "She's requested to join our training team," Sarah added. "Says she wants to help other employees understand what she learned." Martha handed the tablet back, a small smile playing on her lips. "Approve her request. Sometimes the strongest advocates are the ones who've had to change their own minds." They reached the future site of the food court, which was being redesigned to showcase diverse cuisines from local minority-owned restaurants. The old chains were out. Authentic, family-owned businesses were in. "Miss Jenkins," a small voice called out. They turned to see a young black girl, about 12 years old, standing nervously with her mother. "Are you the one who bought them all?" the girl asked. Martha knelt down to the girl's eye level. "Yes, I am. What's your name?" "Jasmine, I sent you a message about the coding classes. I got accepted." The girl beamed with pride. "Congratulations." Martha smiled. "Classes start next week, right?" "Yes, and I'm going to learn to make apps, just like you did." Jasmine's enthusiasm was contagious. After chatting with Jasmine and her mother, Martha watched them walk away, the young girl practically bouncing with excitement. "That's why we're doing all this," Martha told her team. "It's not about getting revenge on a racist mall. It's about showing every Jasmine out there that they can do anything they set their mind to, and that no one has the right to make them feel smaller." Sarah checked her watch. "Speaking of which, the Minority Business Owner orientation starts in 10 minutes. 20 new stores will be joining us next month." Martha smiled. "Then let's not keep the future waiting." As they walked toward the meeting room, Martha caught her reflection in a store window. 1 month ago, she'd been followed through these halls like a criminal. Now she owned them, but more importantly, she was transforming them into something that would outlast her, a place where everyone truly belonged. 3 months into the transformation of Oakwood Mall, Martha faced her biggest challenge yet. The 5 luxury stores that had threatened to leave had finally made their move. They coordinated to announce their departure on the same day, hoping to create a media storm that would damage the mall's new image. Martha sat in her office, watching multiple news channels cover the story. The headlines were exactly what the stores had wanted. Luxury exodus from Oakwood Mall. High-end retailers abandon Progressive Mall. And has Martha Jenkins's experiment failed? James rushed into the office, looking worried. They're trying to paint this as a failure of your leadership. The stores are claiming their exclusive brand image doesn't fit with the mall's new mass market direction. Martha calmly sipped her tea. Interesting choice of words. What are our real numbers showing? James pulled up the latest financial reports on his tablet. That's the thing. Our revenue is up 60% compared to last year. Those 5 stores combined only accounted for 12% of our total sales, even though they occupied 30% of our premium space. And how many applications do we have for those soon-to-be vacant spaces? Martha asked, a knowing smile on her face. 78, Sarah Chen answered, walking in with a thick folder, including 23 luxury brands that have never had a presence in this state before. They've seen our foot traffic numbers and want in. But here's the best part. She paused dramatically. Gucci and Louis Vuitton want to open their first black designer concept stores here. Martha leaned back in her chair. So the old stores thought they would hurt us by leaving, but they actually created an opportunity for something better. Just then, Michelle Roberts, her civil rights attorney friend, burst into the office. Turn on Channel 7 right now. They switched to Channel 7, where a group of former Oakwood Mall employees were being interviewed. But instead of the negative story the luxury stores had hoped for, these employees were exposing the discriminatory practices they had been forced to follow under the old management. We were told to follow certain customers, a former security guard revealed. There was a code word for black shoppers, special observers. We had to radio their locations to each other. Under Ms. Jenkins's management, that all stopped. Now we actually focus on real security issues. Another former employee, a sales associate, spoke through tears. We had unofficial quotas for how many black customers we could let try on clothes each day. They called it maintaining the store's atmosphere. I quit because I couldn't be part of it anymore. Martha turned off the TV. Send these brave people job offers, she instructed Sarah. They chose integrity over a paycheck. That's exactly who we want working with us. James's phone buzzed. The Community Oversight Board just released their quarterly report. Discrimination complaints are down 98%. Customer satisfaction is at an all-time high, and the free technology classes at the Innovation Center. They'd already helped 50 people land tech jobs. Martha stood up and walked to her office window. The view had changed since she bought the building. She could see the mall from here now. The new sign gleamed in the sunlight. Oakwood Community Mall, where everyone belongs. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning, she told her team. But first, get me the contact information for those luxury stores' CEOs. Are you going to try to convince them to stay? Sarah asked, surprised. Martha laughed. No, I'm going to thank them for leaving. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. She picked up her phone and started typing. But more importantly, I'm going to announce our new tenants. We're not just replacing those stores, we're upgrading them. She turned to her team with a determined look. The old stores thought they could shame us with their departure. Instead, they're about to become a case study in how discrimination is bad for business. James grinned. Should I leak the waiting list of luxury brands trying to get into our mall? Not yet, Martha replied. First, let's announce our partnership with the Fashion Institute to open a design school in the mall. We're not just going to sell high fashion, we're going to create it. And this time, the designers will look like all of America. As her team rushed off to prepare for tomorrow's announcements, Martha looked at a photo on her desk. It showed Jasmine, the young girl from the coding class, proudly displaying her first completed app. Next to it was the viral photo of Martha being followed by security guards 3 months ago. Sometimes, she whispered to herself, the best revenge is massive success. 6 months had passed since the luxury store's departure, and Oakwood Mall was buzzing with an energy it had never known before. The mall had become a national symbol of successful transformation, and today was perhaps its biggest moment yet. The main atrium was packed with people, cameras, and reporters. Above them hung a massive banner that read, Grand Opening, the Future of Fashion. Martha Jenkins stood at the podium, wearing a dress designed by one of the mall's new minority-owned boutiques. 6 months ago, Martha began, 5 stores left this mall because they said we were ruining their exclusive image. Today, we're opening 15 new stores that understand what real exclusivity means. It means everyone is welcome. The crowd erupted in applause. Among them were faces that told the story of Oakwood's transformation. There was Karen from the jewelry store, now head of the mall's anti-discrimination training program. Jasmine, the young coding student, sat in the front row with her classmates from the technology center. But today isn't just about new stores, Martha continued. Today, we're launching 3 initiatives that will change the face of retail forever. She gestured to her right, where a group of young designers stood nervously. First, meet the inaugural class of the Oakwood Fashion Institute, 20 talented designers who never had a chance in the traditional fashion world. Today, they're opening their first stores right here in our mall. The designers waved as the crowd cheered. Each of them had a unique story. A black woman who'd been rejected by fashion schools, an Asian designer told his style was too ethnic, a wheelchair-using designer creating adaptive clothing. Second, Martha announced, we're launching the Digital Futures Scholarship Program. Every employee at Oakwood Mall can now take free coding classes at our Innovation Center. Because the future of retail is both physical and digital, and we want our team ready for that future. Sarah Chen, the mall director, stepped forward with a tablet showing the program's statistics. We already have 200 employees signed up for the first semester, she added. And finally, Martha said, her voice filling with pride, we're announcing the Oakwood Investment Fund. We're taking 30% of our profits and investing them back into minority-owned businesses. The stores that left us wanted to maintain the old way of doing things. We're building the new way. James appeared at her side with breaking news on his tablet. Martha smiled as she read it. I just received word that one of the luxury stores that left us has filed for bankruptcy, she announced. Their sales dropped 70% after leaving our mall. It turns out discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business. The crowd murmured in appreciation. Martha then pointed to the new stores lining the atrium. Let me introduce you to what replaced them. Where there was once a store that followed black customers, we now have a black-owned luxury boutique that's already got a waiting list for its designs. Where there was a store that refused to hire diverse staff, we now have a cooperative owned by former retail workers who faced discrimination. She paused, letting her words sink in. But the most important change isn't in the stores. It's in the people. Martha gestured to a group of security guards. Our security team now reflects our community. They protect shoppers instead of profiling them. She pointed to the customer service desk. Our staff speaks 12 different languages because our customers speak 12 different languages. The crowd's excitement was building as Martha reached her conclusion. 6 months ago, some people said we were destroying this mall. They were right. We destroyed the old way of doing business. But look at what we built instead. Suddenly, Jasmine stood up from her seat. Ms. Jenkins, can I show them my app? Martha smiled warmly. Come on up here, Jasmine. The 12-year-old bounded onto the stage with her tablet. I made an app that helps people find their way around the mall, she explained to the crowd. It also translates all the store signs into different languages. And I did it all with what I learned at the Innovation Center. The audience erupted in applause as Jasmine demonstrated her app. Martha put her arm around the young girl's shoulders, speaking into the microphone one last time. This is what's happening when you open doors instead of closing them. This is what's possible when you invest in people instead of rejecting them. She looked out at the crowd. Welcome to the new Oakwood Mall. Welcome to the future. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, Martha watched the excited faces in the crowd. The mall that had once rejected her had become a blueprint for change across the country. But more importantly, it had become a place where the next generation of Jasmines could dream bigger dreams. 1 year after Martha Jenkins was discriminated against at Oakwood Mall, she sat in her office reviewing a special report. The Wall Street Journal had just named Oakwood Mall the most innovative retail space in America. But what made Martha smile wasn't the title, it was the numbers behind it. These results are incredible, James said, spreading charts across her desk. Our revenue has tripled. The Innovation Center has graduated 1,000 students. And get this, 15 other malls across the country want to copy our model. Sarah Chen walked in, carrying even more good news. The Fashion Institute's first collection just sold out in 2 hours. And guess who was spotted wearing one of our designers' dresses? Beyoncé. Martha was about to respond when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Thompson, the former mall director who had treated her so poorly that day a year ago. She read it aloud to her team. Dear Ms. Jenkins, I've spent the past year reflecting on my actions. I watched your mall become everything I said it couldn't be. Yesterday, I started teaching diversity courses at my new job. Your response to my discrimination changed not just the mall, but also my life. I'm sorry. Are you going to respond? James asked. Martha nodded, typing quickly. Thank you for your honesty. The best apology is changed behavior. Keep teaching. Just then, they heard excited voices in the hallway. It was Jasmine leading a tour group of middle school students. Her app had become so successful that she now gave weekly tours to inspire other young people. And this is where Ms. Jenkins plans all the big changes. Jasmine announced as she poked her head into the office. Remember how I told you she bought the whole mall because they were mean to her? Well, now it's the best mall in America. Martha waved the students in. Why don't you tell them about your new project, Jasmine? The young girl beamed with pride. I'm developing a virtual reality shopping experience. You can try on clothes without changing rooms, and the app shows you how to mix and match everything in the mall. The students gasped in amazement. One small boy raised his hand. My mom lost her job at one of the stores that left. But now she takes coding classes here, and she says she's going to earn twice as much. Martha stood up and walked to her office window. The view of the mall had changed dramatically. The parking lot was full. People of all backgrounds streamed in and out. The giant digital billboard cycled through announcements. Free tech classes starting next week. Designer showcase tonight. Community board meeting tomorrow. Ms. Jenkins, Sarah interrupted her thoughts. The numbers from our Minority Business Investment Fund came in. 30 new businesses have opened with our support. They've created 450 new jobs. James added more good news. Remember those luxury brands that left? 3 of them have asked to come back. They said their exclusive image isn't working anymore. People want inclusive luxury now. Martha turned to face her team. Tell them no, we don't go backwards. Just then, a familiar face appeared at her door. Karen, the former jewelry store employee who had once watched Martha like a criminal. Now she ran the mall's training programs. You need to see this, Karen said excitedly, holding up her phone. We just got ranked as the #1 workplace for diversity in retail. And that video from a year ago of you being followed around the store. It's now part of the standard training curriculum at every major retailer in the country. Martha sat back down at her desk, picking up a framed photo. It showed her mother standing proudly in front of her cleaning cart at a fancy mall years ago. Next to it was the latest magazine cover featuring Martha. How one woman's response to racism changed American retail forever. You know what the best part is? Martha asked her team. It's not the awards or the money. It's that somewhere right now, a black child is walking into a store and being treated with respect because of what we did here. A young designer is getting their first chance. A single mother is learning to code and changing her family's future. Jasmine, who had been listening quietly with her students, spoke up. And it all happened because they were mean to you that day, right? Martha smiled and shook her head. No, Jasmine. It happened because we chose to transform their meanness into something beautiful. Never let anyone's discrimination define your path. Let it inspire you to build something better. Outside her window, the sun was setting behind the mall's new sign, Oakwood Community Mall, where dreams shop here. The security guards were changing shifts, a diverse team that protected rather than profiled. The Innovation Center's lights were still on, full of people learning to code their way to a better future. Martha looked at her team. Shall we plan next year's changes?